U.S. Coast Guard aircraft operations save numerous lives every year. But helicopter operations can be dangerous for the crew of your vessel and the rescuers. This video provides an overview of how to prepare for the arrival of a helicopter, what to expect with medevacs and basket retrievals, and the steps to successfully assemble and operate a dewatering pump. Aircraft are restricted in the time they can fly due to fuel limitations. Crew preparation is essential to permit the helicopter to stay on the scene long enough to deliver equipment or make an evacuation.
There was 3.5 feet of water in the engine room. The gearbox, starter, alternator were all underwater. It was horrific. Water flying everywhere. Had to suppress a bit of fear and anxiety to just go jump in and do what had to be done.
Crew members need an emergency plan or station bill of specific duties to prepare for helicopter arrival. Proper preparation and practice can mean the difference between the success or failure of an operation.
And Cooper now from Coast Guard 6007, how do you read?
Duties of the crew include communicating with the Coast Guard. While on deck, crew members need to wear personal flotation devices. Preparing the deck by lowering antenna, booms, rigging, flagstaffs, and securing any loose gear. Positioning vessel into seas. Maintaining watertight integrity. Acting as a messenger between deck and wheelhouse.
Hey skipper, gear's on deck. Helicopter's leaving.
Using hand signals to communicate with the helicopter. Operating Coast Guard delivered equipment.
For a smooth operation is just listen carefully to the helicopter before they get on scene and when they're on scene. If you can, even write down what they're saying so you can review it with the entire crew. What's important is that what the captain is hearing or what the person at the radio is hearing gets communicated to the deck of the vessel for the people that are going to be retrieving the rescue equipment and the trail line, so they know how to handle that equipment when we get on scene.
I'm calling the U.S. Coast Guard. U.S. Coast Guard, vessel Kupernoff, WSCX 2762, with a medical emergency. We've got a medical
Contact the Coast Guard early with name, description, position, on-scene weather, number of people, and nature of problem.
Affirmative, it's the vessel Kupernoff. It's a 80-foot steel tender. We have 7 people on board.
They will set up a communication schedule. It is important rescuers be notified of any changes in weather, patient, or vessel conditions.
Updates with how the patient is doing before we arrive on scene, while we arrive on scene is very important. The communication that we have en route and talking to us about what's going on with their vessel, what's going on with the weather is very important. The weather can be considerably different on scene than it is while we're in transit, especially if it's a couple hundred miles offshore or between base and where we're arriving with the vessel.
It is extremely important to give the Coast Guard an early call for possible help. It is much better to give an early call for help and then cancel it if not needed than delay your call until it is too late to respond. Be sure to give an accurate location. Also be sure to give the nature of the problem.
Yeah, the last meal was about 2 hours ago. It was at lunch. We had a bunch of steamers that we dug on the beach there, okay?
If it is a vessel problem, state the type of assistance you need so the Coast Guard knows what specialized equipment or people to bring.
Roger, Captain, do you want want to give me a description of the patient again, age?
If a medical problem, give patient's name, age, gender, nature of illness or injury, vital signs if possible, history of illness, assistance given, and level of medical care available on board. Let the Coast Guard know if the patient can walk, so they know if a litter or basket is needed.
Yeah, I don't have any vital signs on her. I think she's 39 years old.
If there will be some time before the helicopter arrives, change course and steam in the direction of the helicopter to reduce the distance. In general, if the stern is clear enough to work from, the helicopter will ask you to prepare for its arrival by turning the vessel so the wind is 35 to 45 degrees off the port bow. Keep speed on. This will make it easier for the helicopter to maneuver when delivering equipment. If the stern doesn't provide an adequate hoisting area, the Coast Guard will give you other directions.
It's just important for them to stow all the loose gear on the deck, because this helicopter is going to put out hurricane force winds, which 75 plus miles per hour, and that anything that's not stowed on that deck is going to become a potential hazard and can get airborne, blow around, or certainly they're going to lose it if it's floating around.
In preparation for the helicopter, lower poles, rigging when possible, but not radio antenna. Cut fishing gear loose or bring on board. Illuminate the deck with all lights pointing at the deck and not the helicopter. When on scene, the Coast Guard will give a briefing to the vessel. This will include instructions for an aircraft emergency. You will want to know how many people are on board the aircraft in case the aircrew gets into trouble and needs to be rescued. Tell the helicopter crew about onboard obstructions they may not see, such as guy lines and wires. When preparing for the arrival of the equipment, the crew should coordinate for hand signals. If the orange trail line with weight bag is wet, let it hit the deck or water before touching to avoid static charge. Never tie off the trail line to the vessel. Pull trail line slightly taut to help guide equipment from the helicopter to the deck. Coil the trail line and place it at the side of the deck.
Before we arrive on scene, we're giving what we call a hoist brief or a vessel brief. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is the static electricity that's coming off this helicopter.
Be sure the delivered equipment touches the deck first to avoid possible shock from static charge. Keep rescue equipment and cables in front of you at all times to avoid entanglement.
Remember we had a kind of short trail line.
I seize commands.
Roger.
The Coast Guard performs many medical evacuations, or medevacs, every year. But a medevac also involves careful planning and procedures. For a medevac, secure medical records, including medications, identification, and important papers for patient inside blankets or clothing. Provide warm clothing, secure blankets, and a life jacket if possible. Prepare the patient by providing ear and eye protection.
Okay, no, I think she's ready. Come on out here, give me a hand.
If needed, strap the patient into the litter and position litter on deck just before the hoist to the helicopter. Usually this will be done by Coast Guard personnel. Because the time on scene can be very short, have the evacuee moved as close to the hoist area as possible. If the patient can walk, the basket will be used for an evacuation. The patient must keep their hands and legs inside the basket at all times. Signal the helicopter crew with a thumbs up when ready to hoist. If the trail line is attached, make sure the line is clear of rigging and feet. Stand inboard of the litter or basket. An effective basket retrieval can be accomplished from the water or the deck. If survivors are in a life raft or in the water, a rescue swimmer may be deployed to help them into the rescue basket. Assistance on deck also may be needed due to spray, illness, injury, hypothermia, or fear. Follow the rescue swimmer's instructions to the letter. They are highly trained for this type of work.
When they come down, they just tell you what's going to happen, and they're going to tell you what to do. You know, so that there's no question. When he tells you to do it, you're going to do it.
The basket is designed to hold only one person at a time. In the water, most of the basket will be difficult to see. Board the basket in a sitting position. It is important to keep legs, arms, and hands totally inside the basket to keep from being pinched against the helicopter fuselage. Once the basket is next to the helicopter, you will be turned so you are facing outboard for proper weight distribution and then brought into the aircraft. This will also prevent you from being tempted to get out of the basket until totally inside the safety of the fuselage. The Coast Guard may also rescue individuals by physically grabbing the victim or by using a rescue strap, but always with the help of a rescue swimmer. Try to relax and listen to the rescue swimmer's commands. One common type of pump delivered to you by the helicopter pumps 120 gallons a minute at a 10-foot lift. That is about enough to keep up with a 2.5-inch hole 1 foot below the waterline. These pumps are inspected every 30 days to make sure everything is there and working properly. In a direct deployment, the trail line will be delivered directly to the vessel. Retrieve the line hand over hand without entangling it. When all of the line is paid out, the pump will be lowered. The deck crew will then have to physically pull the line with the pump to the deck. Once delivered, disconnect the metal hoist cable from the box.
On the deck. They're disconnecting the hook.
The helicopter will then back off to a safer location.
Hook is in the cabin, hoist complete.
It is important to try to keep the pump as upright as possible.
Pump is on deck. They're disconnected.
If it tips, oil floods the cylinders and it's harder to start.
Help me out, Barry.
It will be helpful to have 2 or 3 people handling and starting the pump.
Roger, trail line's going out the door.
And trail line is only 5 feet above the water.
If unable to directly deploy the pump to the vessel, the helicopter crew will get the trail line to you and then back off to a safer location. They will then push the pump out of the helicopter into the water. You will then just have to retrieve the pump from the water with the trail line. You should never tie anything that is attached to the helicopter directly to the boat. However, the pump, once in the water, is not attached to the helicopter, so it is a good idea to tie the trail line to the vessel to prevent the floating pump from being lost. Open the pump box once it is secure on deck. Inside, you will find a pump, hose, flashlight, and operating instructions.
I got the instructions, yeah.
Alright.
Hook up this hose, it looks like first.
Okay.
Find the suction hose with the metal strainer that keeps debris out of the pump.
So what's the next step, Mary?
Okay, it looks like we're gonna take this end and put it in the hold and totally submerge it in the water.
Keep the water pickup end of it well submerged, because if any air gets into that at all, then you've got to reprime the pump, and that takes a while. We could have saved a lot of time if we'd had a means of holding that underwater. Finally, the deckhand got down into the water and held it in place, and it was able to keep the prime, and we were able to quickly dewater the boat.
The pump should not be used inside an enclosed space without proper ventilation. It is helpful to have a 15-foot line on board ahead of time so the crew knows how far the suction hose will reach. The pump side of the hose must have a rubber gasket in place. Some pumps come with a spare gasket under the lid of the box.
This must be the gasket they're talking about. Well, put it on here and be careful not to cross it. Looks like it'd be easy to do.
Carefully tighten the hose onto the pump by hand, being careful not to strip the threads.
Okay.
Some pumps, mostly delivered by Coast Guard cutters, come with cam lock connectors.
I think this is where we put the gas, Mary. Okay.
There are two 1-gallon gas cans with a quick connect attachment like an air hose. The fuel is changed every 90 days to keep it fresh. The pump will run for 3 hours on 1 gallon. You do not have to shut off the pump to change gas tanks, and the tank has an automatic vent. The discharge hose is 20 feet long and already connected to the pump. On the far end is a check valve with a metal core covered by a rubber housing. This prevents too much back pressure from being released from the pump so it doesn't lose its prime. Do not cut off the end of the hose. The pump has a priming handle which must be used until water is seen coming from the discharge tube. However, the end of the suction hose must be completely submerged to work effectively. The throttle is preset on most pumps. The choke is on the carburetor. The choke is usually set halfway open. If it doesn't start after 1 or 2 pulls, completely turn off the choke to the left as it will easily flood. Wrap the starting cord around the flywheel after making sure the fuel has been connected. There is a spare starting cord attached to the gas can. Pull on the starter cord. Some pumps just wrap on the flywheel and have no recoil mechanism. Keep working the priming handle a few strokes while the pump is starting until you are sure the prime has taken hold and water is discharging. Have a crew member hold the end of the discharge hose to control it. When finished, the pump should be rinsed with fresh water. Return it to the Coast Guard when you are back in port or contact the Coast Guard to facilitate its return.
Coast Guard radio, the favorite. Hats off. Heartfelt thank you.
Helicopter operations are an extremely efficient way to rescue mariners who are great distances from help. However, the more familiar you are with what to expect, the greater the chances of a successful and safe rescue.
You just never know how it's going to go when you arrive on scene, even with really good communication. It's really gratifying when that mission or that hoist is complete and you're heading back in with that patient and or the ability to help that vessel out.
We figured that boat was indestructible. You know, it was just didn't seem like anything could ever happen to it. But definitely it did. And we were prepared, so it worked. The training for us was so valuable. We knew what to expect. I mean, we had it so recently that everything that happened was exactly the way we were told it was going to be. That's probably the most important thing, to get the training and believe in it, and then trust it, because it's what's going to happen. It's how it's going to be.
Is the boat going?
It's going. Don't worry. So what do you think, guys? We're all together and we're not leaving anybody.
Yeah,
helicopter. Chop helicopter. Right, man.
Having a good understanding of helicopter operations can mean the difference in saving your vessel, your own life, or that of your crew.
This will be another underway litter delivery with trail line.
Roger.
Okay, I'm ready to go there. It's just, all right. Well, just hold about 70 feet. This is not bad. I got plenty of references. I can go whatever altitude you want.
Position altitude are good. Easy forward right. Easy forward right. Hold. Position altitude are good. Server's halfway down. Position altitude are good. Server's going down. Server's on deck. Server's disconnected from the hoist hook. Hoist hook's clear. That's all you're clear to the back and left. Clear. Your position altitude are good. Litter's coming up.
Sun's coming out.
Irene, it's sinking.